Welcome my friend to Short Movie Channel. The movie begins with this family on one of those grim and unlucky days filled with gloom and sadness. The mood of despair fills the home of Richard and his wife, Mary. Richard has finally made the decision to send his son, Stephen, to a boarding school because Stephen has been causing a lot of trouble at his current school. However, it's important to note that Mary is not Stephen's biological mother, she is actually his stepmother. Stephen is sitting in the car, feeling very upset about the decision, as he doesn't want to go to boarding school. Afterward, Richard gets into the car with Stephen, and they drive off, with Mary sadly bidding Stephen goodbye. On the way, Richard tries to talk to his son to make him feel better, telling him that this decision is for his own good. But Stephen is too angry and frustrated to listen to a word his father says. Their argument escalates, and Stephen starts hitting the car in frustration, trying to get out. Suddenly, Richard loses control of the car, leading to a severe collision with a large truck on the road. The movie then jumps ahead 6 months after the accident. Mary is shown waking up in her home, heading to the kitchen, and going about her daily routine. She then enters Stephen's room, opens the window curtains, and we learn that Stephen was left completely paralyzed due to the accident. Unfortunately, Richard lost his life in the crash, leaving Mary to take full responsibility for Stephen. He now has no one else but her. Mary lifts Stephen from his bed, places him in his wheelchair, and lets him watch TV before heading off to work. Mary works as a psychologist specializing in children and teenagers and has set up a clinic in part of her home. In the next scene, we're introduced to a boy named Tom, who is an orphan. Tom shows no interest in Mary or anything she's trying to do for him. After Mary's therapy session with Tom, Joan, his supervisor, informs her that Tom has been aggressive toward other kids at the orphanage where he currently lives. Joan also tells Mary that Tom will soon be transferred to a specialized boarding school in Boston. Mary feels sad hearing this, as she believes she could still help Tom if she continued his therapy sessions. Before Joan takes Tom to the car to leave, Mary says a heartfelt goodbye to him, and gives him a scarf and a hat that used to belong to Stephen as a gift. She then returns to her clinic to continue her work. Later that evening, Mary talks to Dr. Wilson, her professor at the university who is like a father figure to her. She tells him about her decision to place Stephen in a healthcare facility. Dr. Wilson encourages her to follow through with the decision. However, Mary remains deeply saddened, explaining that Stephen is now just a body without a soul or life. Seeing him reminds her of how he used to be healthy and full of life, as well as the memory of her late husband, Richard. In the following scene, we see Mary helping Stephen with his shower, washing his body in the bathtub. But suddenly, she experiences a terrifying moment that feels like a nightmare. She wakes up to find herself in the bathtub, realizing it was just a dream. Mary then hears a strange noise coming from the downstairs area of the house, which leaves her feeling anxious and adds even more tension to the story. Mary decided to quickly go and find out the source of the noise and sound she heard. She got dressed and went downstairs, but she found nothing at all. She stepped outside the house to investigate further. Suddenly, she heard the sound of glass shattering. It was the window of her car parked near her clinic. Mary decided to call for help and contacted the police. After that, she walked toward her car, where she found a boy named Tom hiding inside, trying to shield himself from the freezing cold. She took him home with her and offered him a hot cup of cocoa to warm him up. She then called Joan, the supervisor of the orphanage, and went to her office, closing the door behind her to speak privately away from Tom. Mary asked Joan if Tom could stay with her for a while and assured her that he would get better soon. But suddenly, someone locked the door from the outside. Luckily, Mary had spare keys with her. She unlocked the door and went out, but she didn't find Tom in the house. She noticed that the front door was open, so she hurried outside, searching for him and calling out his name, but to no avail. She returned home without Tom. The next morning, a police officer arrived at Mary's house. She told him about what happened the night before, and he assured her that they would start searching for Tom. He also mentioned that a young boy like Tom, out in such harsh cold and last night's storm, might not have survived. Later that night, while Mary was asleep in her bed, she heard noises and sounds similar to the ones she heard the previous night. She went downstairs and stepped outside again, but she found nothing. On her way back, she heard terrifying and unsettling noises. Feeling scared and anxious, she ran back to the house. When she finally got there and tried to close the door, a hand suddenly appeared, stopping her from shutting it. Mary woke up suddenly, realizing it was just a nightmare, and that she had been dreaming all of it. The following morning, Lucy, who works with Mary at the clinic, came to her house. Lucy informed Mary that she had a teenage patient named Aaron at the clinic. Mary accompanied Lucy to the clinic, where she had a session with Aaron. He opened up to her, expressing that he felt frustrated and suffocated, and that no one cared about him. He also mentioned being upset by the news in the papers and magazines about Tom's disappearance, as the police still hadn't found him. Mary learned that Aaron was struggling with psychological issues due to his parents' divorce, and he couldn't come to terms with it. After the session, Aaron's father, Doug, came in to talk to Mary about Aaron's progress in therapy. Mary reassured him that Aaron was gradually improving and that he would soon be able to accept his parents' divorce. That night, Mary woke up again to the sound of footsteps approaching her bedroom door. The door slowly creaked open, and she saw Tom standing there in the darkness. She closed her eyes out of fear, and when she opened them again, he was gone. Suddenly, Tom reappeared in the room, placed his hand over her mouth, and told her not to make a sound and to stay completely quiet. The next morning, Mary talks to Dr. Wilson on Skype about the hallucinations and strange visions she's been experiencing. Dr. Wilson diagnoses her condition as parasomnia, a type of sleep disorder that causes fear, anxiety, and nighttime hallucinations. Mary tells him, "I believe something happened to Tom, and he died. What I'm seeing must be his ghost." But Dr. Wilson responds, "No, it seems like you were deeply attached to Stephen. After his accident left him paralyzed, you haven't been able to accept his new reality. The boy you keep seeing might just be a projection of Stephen in your mind." Tears stream down Mary's face as she processes Wilson's words, realizing he might be right. Wilson then asks her for a blood sample to run some tests, prescribing her sleeping pills and sedatives to help her relax. Later, a nurse visits Mary at home, collects the blood sample, and leaves. That afternoon, Mary and Lucy go for a walk. Mary tells her, "I've decided to send Stephen to a specialized care facility at the end of this month." Lucy supports her decision, encouraging Mary to start living her life again and to give herself the chance to love and be loved. Mary agrees with Lucy's advice. That night, Mary feels extremely exhausted. As she's about to drift off on the couch, she hears the door slammed shut with intense force. Despite her fatigue, she decides to check on Stephen in his room but doesn't find him in his bed. She frantically searches the entire house, but suddenly hears strange noises and commotion coming from all around her. She follows the sound to the shoe closet, and just as she opens it, a hand grabs her and pulls her in. Terrified, Mary manages to break free, slamming the closet shut with her foot. Overwhelmed by fear and exhaustion, she collapses and falls asleep right there. The next morning, Mary wakes up and immediately checks on Stephen. She's shocked to find scratches and claw marks all over his face. Panicked, she calls Dr. Wilson and tells him everything. Wilson tries to reassure her, saying, "You'll receive your test results tonight, and I'll prescribe the right sedatives to help you feel better." That evening, Dr. Wilson calls Mary on her laptop and says, "I'm really shocked by your blood test results. They showed traces of Stephen's medication and even some narcotic substances." Mary is stunned, unable to believe what she's hearing. She stands up, upset and overwhelmed, leaving the laptop while the call is still ongoing. As she walks away, Dr. Wilson notices something on his screen. Stephen is standing and walking on his own, without his wheelchair. Suddenly, the power goes out due to a snowstorm, and their call disconnects. Wilson tries to call Mary on her landline, but by that time, Mary is already in the basement with a flashlight. There, she finds the boy, Tom, standing in front of her, leaving her terrified. Panicked, she tries to run out of the basement but is stopped by Stephen, standing on his feet in front of her. Without any warning, Stephen attacks her, ties her up, and tapes her mouth shut. When Mary wakes up, she finds herself in the bathtub, trying desperately to free herself. Stephen calmly tells her to stop struggling and reassures her that everything will be fine. He even washes her gently, singing the same song she used to sing to him. When he removes the tape from her mouth, Mary screams as loud as she can, crying for help. Stephen immediately covers her mouth and says, "I don't want you to scream. I need you to stay quiet and calm." He thanks her for taking care of him all this time and not abandoning him. Then, he confesses, "I've been pretending to be paralyzed so I could stay close to you. But unfortunately, my happiest moments ended the moment that boy, Tom, appeared in your life. You started caring about him more than me. That's why I locked him in the closet so he'd die of hunger and thirst." Stephen continues, "I've also been slipping my medication into your food and drinks without you noticing, so you'd think Tom's voice was just in your head. I even gave you sleeping pills." He shows her the pills in his hand, tapes her mouth shut again, and reassures her, "Everything will go back to normal. We'll live together, just the two of us like before." Mary begins crying as Stephen walks out of the bathroom, leaving her there helpless. At this point, we see Dr. Wilson driving his car at full speed, heading to Mary's house while calling the police to alert them. Unfortunately, just as he's about to reach Mary's house, he loses control of the car due to the strong snowstorm. His car crashes into a pile of snow on the side of the road. He gets out of the car and continues walking toward Mary's house on foot. We then return to Mary, who manages to free herself and gets out of the bathroom. She goes downstairs, trying quickly to call for help, but the electricity is out, and the phone lines are down because of the snowstorm. She also hears Tom's voice crying out for help and sees him tied up and restrained. At this moment, Steve senses her presence and starts talking to her. He confronts her, saying she had planned to send him away to a care facility, accusing her of being tired of taking care of him all this time. Steve then grabs an axe and walks toward Tom. Mary strikes him in the face with the back of a rifle she had with her. She quickly goes to Tom to untie him and help him escape before Steve can harm him. But Steve grabs her by the hair, throws her aside, and tries to attack Tom again. Mary grabs his leg, pulling him to the ground, giving Tom a chance to run away. Mary shoves Steve and locks him in the basement. She then calls out for Tom, searching for him until she finds him hiding in a closet, terrified of Steve and refusing to come out. At that moment, Mary hears Steve breaking down the basement door with the axe. She runs outside the house, creating fake footprints in the snow to make it seem like she left. Then she sneaks back inside and hides in the closet with Tom. When Steve gets out of the basement, he follows the footprints outside. However, being clever, he realizes Mary is still in the house and begins searching for her and Tom everywhere. Even when he opens the closet where they're hiding, he can't see them because it's too dark. Meanwhile, Dr. Wilson arrives at the house and finds the front door open. He goes inside and spots Steve's wheelchair. Suddenly, in the darkness, Steve stabs him in the stomach with a knife. Steve accuses Wilson of supporting Mary's decision to send him away and says, "I love her, and she loves me. No one will separate us." Meanwhile, Mary dresses Tom in a jacket to prepare him to escape, but Steve starts nailing all the doors and windows shut. From the closet, they watch as he goes upstairs. Mary tells Tom to stay hidden and not make any noise. She sneaks out and finds Dr. Wilson lying on the ground, still alive. He begs her to save Tom, suggesting she play along with Steve to distract him, or else he will kill everyone. Sadly, Dr. Wilson dies moments later. Mary takes Tom to the kitchen and breaks the skylight to help him escape, but the sound alerts Steve, who hears the noise and rushes toward them. He grabs Mary and starts choking her. Mary pushes Tom out through the broken skylight onto the snow-covered roof. She manages to grab a kettle and hits Steve hard on the head, knocking him down. She goes back to help Tom and starts removing the nails from the door to escape with him. But Steve regains consciousness, grabs a hammer, and chases them. They run to a nearby frozen lake. Mary stands in front of Tom, trying to protect him, but Steve pushes her aside and goes after Tom, attempting to drown him in the icy water. At the last moment, Mary picks up the hammer Steve had dropped and strikes him on the head with all her strength. Steve falls into the water and drowns. Mary pulls Tom out of the lake, hugs him tightly, and looks back at Steve's lifeless body with sadness. Afterward, Mary takes Tom to an orphanage to officially adopt him and keep him with her. The orphanage agrees to her request. Over time, Tom's mental health improves as he continues to receive treatment. The two of them live a safe and happy life, full of peace and tranquility. And with that, the events of today's movie come to an end. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to support us with a like and subscribe if you liked the video.